Happy Tuesday, Mental Health on the Mighty. It's so good to see you this month. And I guess happy July if you're here in America. I hope you had a wonderful holiday this past weekend. I know it was probably a lot different than this year than most years, considering the state of the world right now. But either way, I hope it was enjoyable or relaxing or whatever you need it to be. I'm happy to be here for my monthly live stream. Again, as always, it's an honor, Mental Health on the Mighty, that you allow me to have a platform to share things that I think are important to our community based on lived experience and from the peer support lens. So, in thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, this is a topic I've wanted to talk about anyway, in regards to speaking out and standing up for mental health and what that means to become an ally and become an advocate. And, I just haven't really gotten the opportunity to talk about it. And then in the last month, probably it was right around, the last time that I went live, here in the States, we have had a lot of things happen and a lot of shifting and dialogue and a lot of people joining forces to speak out for Black Lives Matter and really starting to, where they've wanted to speak up before, really have a voice for melanated individuals. So it's been really exciting to watch. It's also been really painful to watch. Arguments, judgment, shame, a lot of things. So today I wanted to just talk about some of the fears that come along when you decide that you want to stand up, speak out, and become an ally for a cause. I do want to preface with, I am not specifically talking about what has been going on and my stance on, supporting the Black community. Of course, I 100% do. But this actually gets into my first point. When you're starting to look at, hey, I want to start doing some advocating. There's something really personal to me. I want to start speaking out. I want to start, helping people to know that I'm an ally or I'm someone that you can trust in this specific social justice issue or maybe mental health issue. It's important to, and by the way, I'm basing all of this on my own personal journey. So actually, that probably brings me to, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Chrissie Hodges, and I'm the author of Pure OCD. I'm an advocate for OCD and a certified peer support specialist here in Colorado. I work with people all over the world, helping to connect them with therapists as well as doing peer support. You're probably like, who is this girl? Anyway, so I'm basing this entire talk off of what I've learned in my own advocacy, lessons I've learned, massive mistakes I've made, things that maybe I regret. So, none of this is really set in stone, or there's no like advocacy Bible, but I just thought I would share this with you. I get this question all the time. And so I thought, what a perfect opportunity when we're just, kind of in that space right now where people are on the fence or people are scared. And I just wanted to give you some encouragement and just some lessons that I've learned through the years. So the first one is kind of going back, I was approached by a friend of mine who she and I are actually going to do some advocacy in a couple weeks on one of my OCD Game Changers, which is my nonprofit fireside chats. I was approached by this friend to do a video because I do YouTube videos on the Black community or, just culture and mental health. And I was like, this was a while back. This was like a year ago. And I was like, no. and then I felt terrible. I'm like, oh my God, she's going to think that I don't want, but I was terrified. I was scared that this was not my realm. I don't know what it's like. I mean, I do know what it's like to walk in the shoes of someone who has a mental illness, who's a woman. So these are all discriminatory things, but nothing along the lines of our, Black and brown community. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what if I totally mess up? What if I look like an idiot? What if I turn everybody against me? And in truth, what I've learned in the last year, that was the best decision I could have made, because I truly didn't understand what what people go through, minority communities. I don't understand what people go through. And so since then, she and I have worked together and talked a lot more, and we are going to collaborate and do something, which is awesome. But that's the first point I want to make. How do I want to phrase this? I don't want to say stick to your expertise. Trust your gut. My gut fired so hard. It was just like, nope, Chrissy, don't do it. But then there was another part of me that was like, maybe I should do it. Maybe I do need to be a voice, and maybe they do need this. But I knew deep down, like, this is not a good idea. And it's not because I don't care, but it's because I'm not the right person for that message. And so that kind of brings me into stick to your expertise. So my expertise is my lived experience. Your expertise is your lived experience. I mean, unless you've gotten a bachelor's, master's, doctorate, whatever, and then have pursued something and become an expert in it. When we're talking about mental health and advocating for mental health, your story is something that you're an expert on. And so I've maintained that rule of thumb since I've started advocacy I think I started advocacy right around 2012, 2013. And to me, it was always, your roots are in what you've been through. Let's not, vary out of that. Now, with the nuances of OCD, there are some things that I haven't experienced, but I will talk about it based on stories I've heard from other people, or in general, just OCD. But if I haven't experienced, I'm not going to claim to know what it feels like. So that's a really important thing to remember. If you're going to decide to stand up and be an ally, know your place, know what you're an expert of, know what you're not an expert of, and don't be afraid to admit that either. This is why I have it on the private chat and not the live comments now, because I get really intimidated, and I get really, I don't really get scared, but I just get overwhelmed when I'm answering real-time questions, unless it's maybe a topic like a panel chat or something at a conference. Mainly because if I can't answer something, or if I feel this pressure to answer something and I answer it incorrectly, I'm like ruminating about it for the next week or the next time I come on the mental health on the mighty. But it's just really important to remember that it's okay to be an expert in what you've been through in your story. And it's also okay to admit to people, I don't know, I am not sure. And hey, why don't I do some research? Or hey, let's talk further about this too. That's not admitting ignorance, and it's not negating your stance. And I think that's what people think is, if I don't go full force into standing up and becoming an ally and are able to answer everything that comes at me, then that means I'm a fraud. That's not true. That's not true. We all have to learn. I'm 8 years into advocacy. I'm still learning. And I've got a lot more to learn about effective ways, or I'm going to make massive mistakes too. And just my fallback is always, if I don't know, I'm not going to pretend to know. And it's really, really serves us well. So the second thing I wanted to bring up, I just have a few points here, and then I'll talk about some of the mistakes I've made that maybe you could learn from. The second point is this: when you're standing up for things that are controversial. Now, I'm not saying that mental health is controversial at all. Hello, this is my whole life. But it's not the topic everybody wants to talk about at a dinner party, right? I mean, mental health is a buzzkill. So, but the problem with that is, because it's like that, then all of a sudden when you do talk about it, it just makes people squirm in their seats. It's like, oh, why are we talking about this? Why did this person just say suicide? Why did this person say this? What does this mean? Because people aren't used to free-flowing dialogue about things that have been long seen as taboo, which, as we know, mental health has been forever. I mean, it's definitely better now than it was, but it certainly has a long way to go. And one of the reasons why is because we're not talking about it enough. We're not normalizing a lot of the terminology that's been so frightening and stigmatizing for people for years. So I get lots of comments from people. I don't like the term mental illness. I don't use the term commit suicide, but some people just don't like to talk about suicide in general. They'll quote things like, oh, you can't talk about suicide because that's going to make people think about it, and then they're going to do it, like all outdated myths or whatever. But I use this terminology on purpose. And the reason why is because when you say those terms, so this is just a bit of a suggestion when you are speaking out and you are becoming an ally for things. When you are speaking out, you want to do it in a way that people are going to mirror how you're delivering your message. So if I'm talking with someone and I'm talking about suicide, because this is such a prevalent issue in our community and something that needs to be addressed, if I'm talking to them about suicide and I'm standing straight up in their face talking about it, and then I'm just like, yeah, and there's really high suicide rates. And I put my head down, what I'm doing is communicating to that person right there, this is not appropriate to talk about. It's hush hush, which exacerbates stigma, which also silences the voices of all of us that experience suicidal thoughts. And also it just puts a negative spin on people that have died by suicide. So, what we want to do is use this terminology, whether it makes people uncomfortable or not, give it to them in a way that we want them to mirror it back. That also goes for anger, though. So when we're talking about mirroring, when we're becoming an ally, you have to remember that whatever your stance is on something, they're going to give it right back if they're learning or listening for the first time. And this is a big learning lesson for me early in the day. When I came out as an advocate, boy, I was fiery, not only for mental health, but for OCD, which is ridiculously trivialized in the whole world. And so I came out like, I'm going to change everybody's mind. I'm going to be the one person and everybody's going to listen to me and F them if they don't. And so I came out angry. I came out like feisty. I came out with fire. And while that is effective to get noticed or make a name for yourself or whatever else, it's not effective when we're creating communicative conversations for change. So I certainly am not saying that the way that I've advocated in a way where my anger was absolutely justified, I shouldn't have done that, because there are many times and will be times and still are that anger is important and it's something that we need to have if we need to create change in our community. But it's also understanding your audience. It's understanding who you're targeting and what you want to communicate. I mean, if you go on to Facebook and like post an article for mental health, right, F everybody who doesn't get it, like right there, you're not going to get anybody's attention. In fact, people aren't going to take you seriously because they're going to mirror that with, well, F you too, if that makes sense. So understanding, that part of it was, it was like an art form for me. It took me a long time, especially doing advocacy in person, to understand like how to temper my frustration with people, how to have conversations in a calm manner to where it wasn't necessarily about changing their minds, but about planting seeds. So that's the next, cat hair. That's the next point I wanted to make is, of course, when we do advocacy, when we become allies, our main goal is to change people's minds. Why? Because something has been a specific way for a long time, and now the tides are turning. It's time for change, and we really want people on board, not only for our a movement or just to be part of our community, and but also to reach other people who might be suffering, and especially suffering under stigma. And so I talked to a lot of people about just recently with what's been going on in support of the Black community. I look at it the way, because I was fortunate enough to see, like, in the 90s into the 2000s, I watched like the shift in public opinion and the acceptance of the LGBTQ community. So I was in the 90s and saw there was not acceptance. There was not, it was this is wrong or whatever. And then we see the movement, and you watch, and what I saw and what I loved is there became this tipping point. And Dave Chappelle, critical mass. That's what he said. I hope I'm quoting that correctly. It's the critical mass. So what you saw was, whereas before you could go on social media or you could be in conversation with someone and they could say something derogatory about the LGBT community, and nothing would happen. There would be just kind of this, okay, we'll let it slide. There's not going to be any repercussions. that's where the shift happened. It was this critical mass. It was, now if someone says something, there are enough of us that are on board and supportive of our, the people that are in that community, whether we are or not and have a big voice in it. We are now in a position where it is more than acceptable, and in fact it's not acceptable to not speak up. And so that's such a beautiful thing when we're looking at a movement. I'm really hoping that that's what's going to happen when we're talking about racism, when we're talking about being able to have people get away with saying things or saying microaggressions, that we're now going to have this critical mass, this enough people on board to where it's going to become unacceptable. Now, when I look and project for the mental health community, that's what I hope happens for us too. We hear that, this. We hear this all. I'm like hanging on over here, trying not to lose focus of my original point. I probably will, so forgive me if I do, but I think it's right here. Let me just write it down. But y'all know how it is. I mean, there's all kinds of little things that are said all the time. I mean, hello, with OCD, it's just every other freaking day you hear, I'm so OCD about this, or I talk with people, I meet people, this is what I do for a living. Oh my God, I'm so OCD about this. And that's what I do. It's like, okay. And I have to gauge, am I ready? Do I want to engage in this? I have a standard response. Sometimes I'm just so tired. I'm just like, okay, well, here I can give you, I can give you some referrals if you need to, if you really have OCD. And then they're like, oh no, I don't, I'm just joking. And then I'm like, okay, OCD isn't a joke. But for any other disorder, oh my God, the weather is so bipolar. Oh, that person, oh, they're so schizophrenic. Oh, my ex is so borderline. Y'all know it. We see it all the time. And so it's at some point, I hope when our movement starts, we get the opportunity to have our voices as loud as we need them to be for change, that's what's going to happen too. We're never, and so this circles back to my point, is we're not, the goal of becoming an ally, the goal of starting to speak out is not necessarily to change everyone's mind, because it's not possible. It's if that's your goal, you're going to fail. And we don't want failure. So we want to adjust our expectations. Our expectations are, I never want to hear somebody say, I'm so OCD again. Okay, maybe that's a little high too. Okay, cut it in half. But the goal is, that we would have enough allies on our side that anytime there was anything mentioned about mental health in a public forum or in an open setting, that someone would say, hey, let's check that language. Let's check that ideology, and let's talk about what it's like to live with a mental health symptom or with a diagnosis. So with that said, just to emphasize the third point, our goal is to plant seeds. So if you become an ally for any type of issue, any type of movement, even lifestyles that you can't relate to, or you're not walking in their shoes, the goal is to plant seeds, because challenging people's core beliefs is typically met with defensiveness, as we have seen in the last month here in the States. When you challenge those beliefs, it's whatever, you don't know, and I don't have to change. But our goal in becoming an ally and starting to speak out isn't to say, I need you to change, which is why earlier I said anger doesn't always work, fire doesn't work, those things don't always work. When we are allies, so understand what I'm saying, when we are gathering around our community in support and we are an ally to support them, our job is to plant seeds. Our job is to create boundaries. When someone says something in front of me about OCD or about being, this is so schizophrenic or that's so bipolar, you better believe in that moment I'm going to say, hey, that language is not okay with me. And I'm more than willing to share why. I can talk to you a little bit about that. They're going to be like, whatever, you're too sensitive. That's fine. But that's a boundary. And I guarantee you the next time I'm with that person, they're not going to cross that boundary again. Or if they do, I will confront them again. And then if they do it a third time, I'll be like, why am I friends with this person? Why do I hang around this person? So we got boundaries on both sides. I create boundaries. I create boundaries, and then I decide, yeah, this is a major boundary. I don't want anything to do with you again. And that's okay too. So yes, I want to wrap up with a few things. Now we're going to talk about the scary parts about becoming an ally and some of the things that keep us from speaking out. And I think this is great because it's fresh right now in my memory from the last month about how terrified I've been to speak out. So I have felt some fear for a really, really, really long time about speaking out, about anti-racism. This is not because I'm for racism. This is just because I have a fear of speaking out, because it's not my wheelhouse. Again, I'm not an expert in it. And from what I've learned from mental health, like, you got to stay in that expert box over here and be able to answer a slew of questions, or be able to defend what you're saying, or be able to just go down the rabbit hole with people if that's what you need to do. And this is not something I have, I haven't confronted that fear. And so this last month has been pretty scary. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start speaking out. And so some of the things that have happened this last month is exactly, it's just perfect timing for it to have fresh in my memory about what's going to happen if you decide I'm going to become an ally, whether that's a social justice issue or mental health or whatever you're passionate about. People might argue with you. That is a given, right? And so I just talked about that. Like, if you're challenging people's core beliefs or challenging the beliefs that they've been taught, or whatever, you're in for an argument, or you're just in for negative comments or negativity or dismissal, which can also be painful, especially when you know what you're advocating for, you're really passionate about it, and it's right. Dismissal hurts. Rejection hurts. Being argued with or name calling hurts. But that's what people do when they're challenged to think differently, and A, they're not prepared, or B, they're feeling defensive. That's just the reality. Again, we're just planting seeds. So it's really important for us as allies to understand that it's not personal. It might feel personal, and I'm going to tell you, I say that, and there have been plenty of times where I have gotten off of social media and wanted to cry and felt empty when I've been insulted or when I took things personal. At the end of the day, why are you standing up? Why are you becoming an ally in the first place? That's the bottom line. And you are going to meet resistance if it's something that's worth standing up for. Because if you have to stand up for it, there's a reason. There's a lot of people standing against that. And so becoming an ally can be scary because you're going to face that resistance head on. So one of the things I like to tell people is ease your way in if you're not ready to get that negativity. You can start that on social media by liking things, reposting things, following people so other people see, oh, they're following this person who's just very adamant about mental health advocacy, who's really adamant about LGBTQ rights, who's really adamant about anti-racism. You can follow these people, you can like this post, so people start to get an idea of like, Chrissie is following these things, she's liking these things, I wonder what her stance is. And then once you get comfortable reposting something, writing an opinion, posting an article, doing things that are just opening up some dialogue. So a couple notes I wrote here is, don't be surprised if people don't respond. Sometimes if you get yourself all worked up and you're like, I am going to do this, I am going to be an ally, I'm going to stand up, and then all of a sudden it's like crickets. You get like one like, and you're just going, okay, well, what happened here? I thought that, this is what we're supposed to do. I thought, I've waited all this time, I wanted to do this, and now nothing. Don't worry. People are watching, and people are seeing, and people are grateful. When it's marginalized communities, everybody is scared. Unless you're already outspoken, everybody is scared because they're scared of the same things you're scared of. So if you post something and someone doesn't like, or someone doesn't comment, and don't take it personal. What they're seeing is it's like a secret ally. They're like, oh, okay, this person gets it. But then I'm going to tell you on the flip side, there's other people going, I can't believe this person believes this. Because again, it's conflicting with their own beliefs. You cannot change that. You can't change that. All you can do is plant seeds. The second thing, people might defriend you. People might not want to hang out with you anymore. That's okay. It's going to hurt. Or it might not hurt. And maybe this is the opportunity to get rid of like the 50 friends you don't want to see anymore. I don't know. But just be prepared for it. I can only use my lived experience in this. It has been baffling to me to watch the people in my life that I have lost because I have become an outspoken advocate for mental health because of the things I'm willing to say out loud, because of the depth I'm willing to go. If the question is, do you care more about our friendship or our relationship? Why would you sacrifice one for the other? The answer is going to be, I'm going to sacrifice for the entire community of people that are suffering and dying because nobody else will speak out. Oh, that's harsh, but I don't care. I really don't. Because the truth is, when you become an ally, it's not your job to disrupt relationships. It's not your intent. Sorry, not your job. Not your job. It's not your intent to disrupt relationships. You're just being you and presenting a different side. If someone comes to you and says, this relationship is disrupted because you are doing this and I don't agree with it, that is not on you. That's on them. It's painful sometimes, but again, an opportunity to plant a seed and an opportunity to be an ally to a greater goal that is going to reduce suffering in the long run. So to wrap up, we're right at almost 30 minutes. To wrap up, I just want to say this. Advocacy, becoming an ally, deciding to speak out. It is tough. It is scary. It is challenging, but it's also so rewarding. You find out so much about the different people that maybe you're friends with on social media or that you know in your real life, everyday life that you may not have known about them. Because again, if someone sees something that you post and they feel the same way, but it's out of their comfort zone, they might come to you and say, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you posting that. Or you become a safe space for people in the community you're standing up for. And right there, it's worth it. In advocacy, most of us say, there's two things I want to convey before I close out. In advocacy, let me do this first. My rule of thumb has always been, always, never put something out that you're not willing to take negative feedback about and that you're willing to defend. Meaning, I don't mean defend like I have to be right, but defend, I'm like, this is my perspective, take it or leave it. So I at this point, if you've seen my YouTube, there's not much I haven't put out there. But I keep that in mind, and I sometimes fluctuate that depending on the crowd I'm speaking to too. I might say something at an OCD conference or at our nonprofits conference, OCD Game Changers, versus if I'm speaking to a sheriff's department or some other department that's not typically used to talking about mental health, right? Because I used to speak to that's why I'm saying this is because I used to speak to the CIT. Yeah, that's it. Oh, I'm like forgetting, it's been so long. The crisis intervention team training, I used to speak to them every single month. And so I was very different in those trainings than I would be, mental health. So it's important to understand if you are willing to take the negative feedback and you're willing to defend it and not take it personal, then yeah, it's stand up for it. But if you're not, it's okay to not do that just yet. And maybe with practice, you'll be ready. And lastly, most advocates, most allies, the rule of thumb is always, and I love this because every time people get into advocacy and I help them or I talk with them or even mentor them, I love it because it's always the same thing. If I could help one person, then it's worth it. So if we keep that in mind, that ties back into what I just said. Standing up, speaking out, even if it's as little as liking something or just reposting or just showing that you're in support, you again become a safe space. So when people know, or when people get into a place where they need someone they can trust, they know you're there. They know that you're that person, and they know that you are willing to take the risk to stand up for them. So that's my talk today. Thank you so much. I hope it was helpful. I don't again, it's not like the only facts it's based on, again, going back to point one, is just my own experience. And I consider, myself to have a pretty decent career of advocacy so far. Made a lot of mistakes, but learned a lot of stuff and met a lot of wonderful people along the way, including many of you in this community. So thank you for being here today. Thank you, Mental Health on the Mighty, for having me here. I look forward to seeing you in August. I can't believe it's already August already. And I hope that you have a wonderful month here in July. Bye.